I'll make it right again, but it's no use, you said. And my hunger grows and grows. I have to write the meaning of my life, or else everything's in vain. When the glory tries to tempt you, it may seem like what you need. But if glory makes you happy, why are you so broken up? So tell me how it felt when you walked on water. Did you get your wish? Floating to the surface quicker than you sank. I know. So tell me how it felt when you walked on water. Did you get your wish? Floating to the surface quicker than you sank. I know. Don't say you lose just yet. Get up and move ahead, and not only for yourself, 'cause that's your role, the work that stirs your soul. You can make for someone else. One day you choke, you urge yourself.
Well, hello everyone. Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you all are having a great week so far. Thank you for spending it here with us at Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we talk Gundam, gaming, and other good things as well. Joining me as always, of course, is Adam Blue of Gundam Explained, and we have a special guest today, Kyle from Simply Newtype. How are you doing?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Doing great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, yeah, thank you for joining us today. I think it'll be a
Yeah.
fun discussion of everyone knows my favorite topic, late UC. No, I'm kidding. Maybe Kyle will change my mind, and
Yeah.
We'll see.
we'll see what we can do there. Of course, I forgot to introduce myself here. Of course, I'm
Who are
Steven,
you?
aka Midnight Hatter, the guy that you tune into every week. Um, yeah, so I've got a couple of announcements here before we kick off into everything, and I want to do like a proper introduction for you, Kyle, because there's some other stuff
Sure.
that I think we should talk about too. I mean, everything with Free Speech Media Group, the group
Mhm.
that are head of,
Yeah,
is really interesting to me, and I want to kind of dive into those topics a little bit more.
definitely.
But before we get started, I do have an announcement to make. Congratulations to you guys. Probably know him around the chat as Unusual Less Pyro. That is the most tongue twistery username to say. Congratulations, Pyro. You were selected in the drawing for last week's giveaway for the 4,000
Oh, snap.
subscriber special. So you're going to have a Gundam Lindworm coming your way once the decals are done printing over there. So congratulations, sir. I will reach out to you,
Nice.
watch your email. See, we've got some of the usual suspects in chat: King Dylan, Zionic Shadow, Ultronimus, and my favorite, no one. But yeah, Shirt
Oh, no.
Lad, Dan, Johnny Tacoma, good to see you guys too. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's see. Like I said, I really want to talk about and links in the description, of course, to Adam's stuff and Kyle's stuff. Both of them dropped new videos today on their channels, so if you haven't checked them out yet, links down below to check those out because they were really good. And now Adam and I have beef.
Where you come up with something.
He
Yeah.
had to do it. Yeah, I'm surprised that he didn't in his tier list rank my Zeta Gundam even lower just to
Mm.
get under my skin.
Hey,
Um,
I knew that was enough. That one
right.
letter down was enough.
Anything short of S is gonna bother me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Kyle, I want to talk to you like I said,
Mhm.
you you've been putting out some amazing content recently. I have described you as like kind of like Black Pants Legion, but for
Oh,
Gundam, which I would say is is high
mhm.
praise coming from me, but it's
Thank
also
you.
slightly inaccurate because I would say that you inject so much humor and personality into your lore coverage
Right.
of UC Gundam. You know, you almost have that kind of, drunk uncle relating,
Yes.
relating the story to, which is good because, I feel like when you're going over lore topics and stuff like that, it's very
Mhm.
easy for it to come off as very bookish and, like, academic, and so I'm glad that you are keeping it light and lively.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It wasn't always like that. I was pretty dry at the beginning, just reading facts for the most part, which I would actually recommend if you're ever doing anything, just to like start to find like your voice. Everyone,
Yeah.
unless you are an established writer already and kind of know your tone, I would recommend just kind of doing that and then going from there and building a personality off of that, or at least a stage personality or a presence online, I guess.
Yeah,
Um, because you really don't know where it's gonna go at all.
Yeah.
it's true.
Um, so it could have went a completely different direction. Who knows? It could have been super serious and like dramatized, like Comic Storian does with like a lot of their videos where they do voices and all that stuff. Could have
Oh,
went that way, but it
Yeah,
didn't. It just came out. Yeah, it's like more of like the that like backseat driver kind of commenting on the Universal Century as it's going through,
yeah,
which
and
I
I
like.
love that.
I dig it.
yeah.
Y
Yeah.
that's great advice too for people just starting out in the content creation realm is, really just finding your voice, not kind of setting your own tone because
Yeah.
Yeah.
because if you try to go into it like being a character, then, you're gonna burn out because you're kind of trying to maintain this
Mhm.
facade that you made for yourself instead of just kind of naturally evolving that.
Yeah, it's like the character comes out of that,
Mhm.
which I think is neat, and
Yeah.
then you'll see that if you talk to, or see some of their videos or talk to them, but then watch a video where they're being that character where you can kind of see yourself still,
Yeah,
but it's kind of heightened. It's that comfortableness,
Yes.
um,
Definitely. And
yeah.
knowing your audience too helps too.
Very
Yeah.
true. I did not know that when I first started out on YouTube, and, I quickly discovered I was like, wow, there's a very niche group of people of this, like, overlap of tabletop gaming and Gundam that I didn't
oh,
even know existed."
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
but that brings me to one of the sort of core, values behind the Free Speech Geek media group, right? So,
Mhm.
like, you know, w like, on your website, you mentioned kind of near the tail end that you're really all about kind of empowering people to create their own communities and to find their own niches and things, as
Yeah.
opposed to kind of trying to be part of, like, an inclusive group, like, that's kind of all encompassing, and that's
Yeah.
something that I really resonate with, because that's kind of the message behind everything I do on this channel is, like, you know, empowering and inspiring people to kind of get into their hobbies and kinda dive in with both feet.
Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, I think that's important, especially not only just in terms of like getting a more diverse understanding of the culture, but like in terms of just like a business side, like generalized geekery is dead. It's dead. You can't just be like this general dude that likes
no,
everything. You need to have some type of niche knowledge. The day of just liking, I do a little bit of Star Wars, I do a little bit of Gundam, I do some gaming here and there. It's not going to, it might work out if you have a great enough personality. It's not for most people though. So I
Yeah,
think we're in the age of hyper niches,
yeah,
just diving deep into just one thing that someone hasn't even talked about. Like that's why I did Gundam. I think we talked about it on
yeah,
Gundam Explained that like I started this mainly because there wasn't a lot of things, at least being talked about in terms of certain mangas relating to the anime, and at least
uh,
in
yeah,
from a Western perspective, I should
yep,
say.
yes,
Um,
that's correct.
so I
Yeah,
kind of just filled that void, and I think that's what people need to start doing. As a person who's made stuff for like 15 years, most of it doesn't get noticed, and it's because they're probably too ego driven. But something like what I'm doing with Simply Newtype, it's filling a void, it's filling a gap that people want and need. So
yeah,
I would definitely recommend trying to find whatever that is for you if you're trying to create stuff. Um, Try to fill a void. Yeah,
yeah,
that isn't there.
definitely.
yeah,
And
and you never know if you have like a little hobby or interest of yours that you might take it really personal and not wanna
Mhm.
share it, but you never know if that is, like, an interesting little unique aspect of you that
Yes.
would be worth sharing, especially if you have that urge to share.
Definitely. Yeah, and I find that if you can find the intersection between 1 or 2 interests that,
Yes.
that give your content or, just your personality, a
Mhm.
unique spin, because, there's a lot of people that do a lot of different types of, say, for instance, 3D printing content, but there's not a ton of 3D printing Gundam content. So it's
Mhm.
like, kind of
Yeah.
identifying where those intersections exist, where,
Yes.
and it's great because for me personally, I'll take things that I learn from, like, silicone mold making channels and stuff and apply it to Gunpla, and, it's a nice way
Nice.
to kind of blend those things together, and gives me an opportunity to share maybe techniques that people haven't considered yet. So, it's, yeah,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that, and again, it's one of the sort of core, values behind everything that I do is, like, kind of
Cool.
like, I made a Gundam tabletop game, but,
Mhm.
like, I don't want everyone to play my game. I want people to go and make their own
Make
games
their
and
own.
make their
Yeah.
own
Yeah.
content and make.
Exactly.
So, yeah, everything is kind of about inspiring that point. So I really appreciate that about Free Speech Geek.
I'm glad
And
it's working.
yeah, it's good. One of the other things that I think, and Adam, I think you're gonna appreciate this too, is, you mentioned, on your website about your interest in right to repair, which is something that
Yes.
I've only recently sort of kind of gotten into, consumer rights and consumer protections and things like that. And Adam and I have been talking a lot
Mhm.
recently about emulating video games and, like, dead media,
Yes.
especially, with, like, the Gundam Evolution revival that has been powered by fans, which is something,
Yes.
like, I didn't even like Gundam Evolution, but I support the people doing it
Right.
just
Yeah.
because
Hell
it's
yeah.
like,
The
hey,
principle of it, yeah.
yeah, fight for the things that you care about. So, yeah, can you give me a sort of, a rundown of where you stand on that, topic, and, like, maybe how you think that it fits in with things like, emulation and kind of fan created content?
Absolutely. It actually started more low tech. My interest came from the infamous McDonald's flurry machines that are very, very much not right to repair. And a lot of franchisees who franchise McDonald's are realizing that McDonald's are screwing them over with these machines that don't work. None of these freaking ice cream machines work anywhere because no one could fix them. You have to use McDonald's specific engineers or mechanics to fix the machine.
Yeah,
And there needs if you're a franchisee, you should be able to have the right to do this on your own, hire your own mechanics. There should be some type of third party outlet out there. So it kind of started with that. I know John Deere, the tractors, is also a huge one in terms of right to repair. Those things you got to get like specific engineers to fix them, and so it's like I try to go for more of a higher, I guess, perspective on it. But absolutely, when it comes to emulation, like I'm looking at all these people that are running switches on on their awesome, what is it, the ROG Strix or
Yeah.
the,
The ally, the
or
ROG
the
Ally?
yeah,
Yeah.
that or the Steam one, the Steam Deck,
Oh, yeah,
and
Steam
it
Deck,
just
yeah.
runs way better, it runs on OLED, it runs at a higher frame rate,
Yeah.
and not Microsoft, sorry, Nintendo is just they're cracking down on it, right? But, like, they it's kind of sad that they made this device, which is why I personally never bought a Switch because it just felt so underpowered. I feel like, why can't these devices, and now we're seeing these devices come out, but
Yeah.
at the time I was like, why can't these devices run these supported hardwares at a certain, uh, like how Dolphin's kind of emulating it into Windows and even what is it? Linux. It works on Linux and Mac, surprisingly. So like it's cross-platform. Like, how do you compete with that? Um, that's interesting. I get it from a business perspective, but, like, when it comes to competing in terms of people's attention and desires and wants and needs for what the market wants, um, yeah, they're falling behind really, really
But
badly.
isn't it interesting though that Nintendo is still seen as the most successful, but people are so vocal about how their games are held back
Yeah,
by the
Yeah,
hardware,
yeah,
even though they were able to fill that niche of their handheld market being the one that always survived. but it's weird how yeah, because I would emulate Breath of the Wild on my PC so I can get the 60 FPS. But, like I didn't even bother playing the Calamity, it's the Dynasty Warriors style,
Oh,
Hyrule
yeah.
because it
Oh, okay,
ran
yeah, yeah.
so bad. It was under
Mm,
30 FPS, um, but they get away with it, and
They
yeah,
keep getting away with it.
I call it I've just talked about this in the past, but it's like the power of the mouse, right? Look at back at Disney,
yeah,
right? Right now they're just this conglomeration, but that mouse really still holds true in people's hearts, and we're seeing that with Nintendo. These characters, Mario, Zelda, these are iconic characters that are becoming religious icons,
Oh,
and people will
definitely.
take abuse for their religious
yeah,
icons. Um, and
Yes,
that's where I
we
think
will be
we're at.
martyred.
Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing right now is that everyone has these issues, right? And our society, the way to combat that is to speak with your dollar, right? So don't
Yeah,
buy from 'em. But we're seeing a
yeah,
lot of people still consuming, consuming, consuming. So there's something there. There's
very
something
well
there
said.
to that. There's more Nintendo's put on a pedestal almost, I feel. Like more so than Sony. What do they got? Like God of War. They used to have Crash Bandicoot back in the
yeah,
day.
I
There's
even
not
think
really
Sony's
Well,
on a
and now
pedestal.
Xbox is gobbling up all of the,
Yeah.
Xbox.
studios, so the
Yeah. Oh man.
But you
so
know what? In all this, I will always appreciate Xbox's stance because they have been trying their hardest to make as many games backwards compatible as possible.
True.
And they
True.
even talked about an initiative to continue to do that. And you would think, oh, are they just doing that to try to be cool because that's all they've really got to connect? Maybe so, but at the same time, I think it's very beneficial when you want to adopt a service that it has like a legacy to it. Right
Mm,
now, I think Xbox has more backwards compatibility than Sony. They have it where you got to like pay to download a game with
right.
their PlayStation plans, but with Xbox, if you already have the disc or already owned it, they made most of those Xbox Live Arcade games downloadable on a modern hardware and then being cross-platform with PC. So, got to
yeah.
give it to Microsoft
Yeah.
there.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and, like, from a business perspective, yeah, I can understand wanting to protect your bottom line in certain regards, and I think that that's where you can, talk about, like, voided warranties or something, but, like, even in regards to, like, some of the more mainstream attempts to, bring Nintendo products up to spec, like, the YouTube channel Zach Builds, like, he 3D printed parts and, like, basically made his own Switch Pro, and it's like, once you buy the hardware, it's like buyer beware. If you start messing
Yeah.
with it and you screw something up, then that's on you, you're not don't expect, like, Nintendo to replace your Switch for free, but, like, yeah, you shouldn't be able to tell me, like, "No, I can't mod my Switch." Like
Yeah.
Exactly.
And, the biggest problem is just e-waste. There's just so much garbage. Your phone is being thrown away every 2
Oh,
years. It doesn't
yeah.
have to be, but it
No,
is because it's all soldered together in one piece, can't replace anything, can't even replace your battery most of the time anymore.
I know.
Um,
I've still got my iPhone 5S.
at a
Yeah, that's
certain
amazing. Yeah,
at a certain
and I
point.
just recently bought
Yeah.
an S20 FE just
Mhm.
for a project, and that phone is just as good as my 22. And
Mm.
so, yeah, you're right. Like, we're throwing away these phones and getting new ones all the time, but we don't need to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think at a certain point, we're gonna have to be all like, "Yo, there's a lot of lithium ion just in waste dumps. We gotta either figure out how to recycle it." That's probably gonna be the solution. We're not gonna solve this problem by being conscious humans. We're going to figure out a way to solve it and keep doing what we do.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that, I've been talking about recently, and I mentioned this on Twitter. I've got a video coming out talking about, plastic recycling because,
Mm,
I'm a big Gunpla fan. Like, obviously, I love building plastic model kits, but, yeah, I mean, there's so much plastic waste involved with that, not only making the products, but just, like, the garbage parts that come with it. And so far,
mhm,
everyone kind of is aware that plastic recycling is a scam, but they don't really understand why. And so it's refreshing to me to see like there's a startup out of Canada that has found a way to make it more cost effective to recycle plastics because of course the
mm,
problem is that you've got all these different resin codes and you can't combine plastics because once you do that then you know they're going to have
Mm,
different melting points, and you don't want
Yeah,
to burn plastic because that's where your toxins get leached
yeah.
out. And so, matching the different melting points is difficult when it comes to dealing with plastics. And so, the most expensive part of recycling plastic is just sorting the stuff.
Yeah.
true.
um,
Crazy to think.
Mhm, definitely.
but yeah, I mean, yeah, to your point, I think that yeah, the future is definitely going to be about people finding a way to continue doing the things that make us happy and continuing to make them more efficient and more optimized. It's not going to come from sort of top down declarations
Yeah.
of intent. But that's a bit of a downer topic. So let's
Yeah, yeah.
let's move on to something that I think everyone here can enjoy, which is Gundam.
Oh,
Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I've been astounded by the growth of your channel, Simply Newtype, just because
thanks.
it's, and like you said, I think that it addresses a need in the sort of market
Mhm.
for Gundam attention, particularly in the West. And
Yeah.
you dive into content that like Adam and I won't touch with a 10-foot pole, not necessarily because we don't like it, but it's like obviously Adam and I have like our own niches, and so
Right.
for things like manga and deep lore that don't get a lot of attention, I'm glad that you are shining a light on these things. So was that
Yeah.
something that kind of came about naturally as you were watching the anime, or was that something that you kind of you always knew that you wanted to attack those topics?
I knew I wanted to attack those topics when I started, my YouTube channel, but as a fan, that never really crossed my mind too much. I casually read the comics here and there, but it wasn't until I started deep diving into, like, the lore that I actually started going, "Alright, I need to figure out why this connects to this," and most of the time it doesn't, it's just bad writing, but I have to figure it out somehow.
Uh, yeah.
Right, we have to have our own headcanon for why it
Yes.
works.
So
Um,
I do, I try to deep dive into as much, of the lore, the canon, the non-canon, even if it gives me some insight into a character or something that I could kind of, make assumptions about, even if it's just for entertainment, um, to really help understand whether it's the characters or the story or the plot, and just kind of go from there and then make fun of it as well because it's weird. It's really weird. You gotta accept that some of Gundam stuff is weird and
oh,
out
yeah.
there,
Yeah,
which
for
I think
sure.
a lot of Gundam fans don't do. Maybe they're younger and they're just like, "No, this is the greatest thing ever. I love this. This is my life." But,
No,
I've
that's a
gotten through
good
all.
point. I feel that way because I like to take it seriously because I like it and it's what I like
Yeah,
about it. But there's always room, and I think it's healthy, and we were just talking about that with X-Men,
yeah.
to be able to look at the things a little critically and maybe have fun with it and not
Mhm.
necessarily make it bring you down. And
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think that comes across real well in your videos.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely. And that's a problem I see in a lot of fandoms lately is there's no room for criticism, which is, I guess that's what makes a fan and a critic is someone willing to be able to see something more reasonably, rationally, and not as kind of tunnel vision like that most fans are usually in, which I've been there. I get it. I think
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
mean,
too old to be that big of a fan anymore. No matter how much like I love X-Men, I love Gundam, but I will never be that person anymore that just is
that
a
just
fan, like just
yeah,
is so
mindlessly
devoted to it.
consumes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's almost like it's something that it becomes a religion. That might be a strong word, and
Yes.
you will love it, you appreciate it, and then you feel like there's this seriousness you have to have with it. But I think that also is what happens if you don't manage your enjoyment of things. I don't know what the word is because there should be that balance.
Yes.
Because if you get too far one side, you might just be hurting yourself in the end because then your expectations always be high. You might get into more conflicts with people in a discussion. But if you're
Yeah,
able to kind of ease back and have that fun, yeah, I think it allows you to have a more enjoyable time. And maybe that's like you mentioned younger people, and maybe that's the growth
Mhm.
phase. Like when you're younger, you tend to feel that way about certain subjects. And I think as you get older too, you learn when things you like don't turn out like Star Wars or something, and then you're kinda like, "You know what? This is just the way things are sometimes. I don't wanna always be negative."
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're younger, you're definitely full of piss and vinegar, as they say, and, oh, man. it, what was it? Oh, man, I had a thought and then it escaped me.
And then Adam talked. Yeah.
And then it's gone.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think someone, mentioned on Twitter, like, differences between, aged generations consuming content, and I often say, like, tongue in cheek, and it's almost to just remind myself, like, yes, we are just watching, like, 22-minute long toy commercials, at the end of the day, the content is not there to really stir your engagement of things, it's really just there to sell a product. It just so happens that, it can have deeper themes, it can have deeper meaning. Um, but yeah, someone was commenting about, like, the difference of perception in cartoons, like, in the East versus the West, and, like, how it's hard to delineate what makes an adult anime versus what makes an adult, like, Western cartoon. And I think that this was related to X-Men, actually, and someone said, like, typically adult-themed cartoons in the West are heavily vulgar, it's, like, loaded with F words and, like, sexually explicit and things like that,
Mm,
Right.
and there's less of that, like, definitive line when it comes to anime,
yeah.
and I think
It's
that
true.
kind of goes to what you were saying, Adam, about, like, sort of the maturity of the people watching the content, right? Like, are they mature enough to appreciate the themes without having the kind of adult content thrust upon them?
Yeah, and I think the original X-Men, and I'm watching that alongside the new one, and the original X-Men still does a good job of having those mature themes, but the way they speak on it is lighter than the modern adult stuff. I think of a show like Invincible and how
Yeah.
Mhm.
super adult that is, so it's like, I'm not gonna have my son watch that yet. But even this modern X-Men, it's on the edge of both. It's like it's cool for kids, but there are some things that they are too on the nose about that it's like, okay, is that a conversation to explain? Like the one main thing that my son got out of the Magneto and Rogue thing was, isn't Magneto old and Rogue is young? And I'm like, well, there's more to it. But then, like, at the surface, yes, that is kind of odd for him to see, because what does that mean? When
It's kind of
really
odd
there's
that
a
they're
lot of
bringing
stuff.
it that up that early in X-Men '97 too, because that's, like, a much
Yeah.
later in the
Oh, interesting.
If you were to ask me 10 years ago if they would ever do an animated version of the weird, convoluted storyline that is Madeline Pryor, I would say no, simply because it involves, like, a weird threesome it's like, I can't imagine an American audience wanting that, and then here we are, 10 years later, they're doing it. They're not I thought they would, like, kind of skirt around it or something. No. They're diving into it. They're saying essentially Cable had sex with a clone of Jean Grey and created a baby with it, and they're
Wait,
dealing
Cable
with that struggle.
or
Sorry,
Cyclops?
sorry, Cyclops
Okay.
yeah.
had sex, and then even I don't know if you watched today's episode, I don't wanna
Yeah,
spoil
I
anything,
saw
but
it.
Cable does come back, and there's just this really good moment where Jean talks to Cable, and he just looks at her and goes, "You're not her," meaning you're not
Yeah,
Madeline, and you
Mm.
just like it's just like small lines like that that
that was
really work. It really works without having to use a kind of like
a
without having
monologue.
to, like, go into yeah, monologue, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, without
There you
No,
having
go.
exactly. That line, like, said so much.
yeah.
So then, Adam, I wonder if that goes back to the sort of point you were talking about where, you are watching it with your son, and is it forcing you as a parent to engage with conversations that you might not necessarily have brought up with him? Um,
That's
it
a good point.
and maybe that's the creator's intent, maybe it's not necessarily what we want, but
No,
what do you
that's a good
think?
point because when the episode was over, my thought is I had criticisms, but then when I looked
Mhm,
at him, I go, "What'd you think?" And he goes, "I liked it." And I was like, "Okay," because normally he'd tell me or he'd get on his phone if he was bored. And
mhm.
I just was surprised because even with today's episode, there was a lot of dialogue. There was a lot of that stretched out sort of, "Yes, I get it. Yes, I get it." And so what then I see my son experiencing that I wouldn't have experienced is how drawn out depressive states are with characters. Like
Mm,
it's there's less of that lighthearted, like, okay, group, we're back together. I mean, they were kind of, you know, doing that away actually, but then it kind of went back into that depressive state. And I guess
mm,
I'm using depressive state, but more of where the tone is not like, all right, we're
yeah.
we came back from all this, I don't know.
I mean, that
Sure.
could go a
Yeah.
long way to describing why the original Gundam series failed, commercially at least, is like, when the studio wanted more of like that superhero action, entertain the kids, and Tomino and his team delivered like these long, drawn out, like, why should I care about this Miharu character? Like, why am I watching this? It's
That's a
like,
good point. I didn't really
Mm,
think about that because it did fail at first.
yeah.
And just because something fails doesn't mean it's bad. There could be time, place, whatever, but that's still interesting because sometimes if something's really good, like, people notice. But
yeah,
that's a really good example with Gundam. Uh,
Did fail.
yeah,
I still think that, they're doing the original run of 0079 after Gundam Wing on Toonami was a bad call. Dude, it just is such a juxtaposition between the 2
yeah,
that
tonal
it
whiplash for
it
sure.
yeah. I think that didn't help. I know that a lot of big Gundam fans that are, like, our age or closer to, like, an older millennial or up, typically are, they were pirates as a kid, so that's how they got it, you know?
Yeah.
The most people that didn't get into it, I hear it's because of what they saw on TV, and that's so unfortunate. So, timing and yeah, like you said, timing is everything, so I bet I'm sure that played such a big factor.
And that brings up a very important topic, like you said, as far as like piracy goes, and again, going back to that idea of right to repair and
Mhm.
seizing upon like abandonware, so to speak, is
Yes,
the content that you create is around like mangas and things that were not distributed in the West. I mean,
exactly.
so many of them are fan
yeah,
translated, and huge shout out to Zionic Scanlations for
Yes.
doing the work that he does because without that there would be so much that we
Mhm.
don't ever get to see. And so
Exactly.
it's if a company is not willing to distribute to a certain market, then I feel like it's almost imperative that fans of that media take on that responsibility and take on
yeah.
that burden to distribute that content so that the rest of us can, you know,
Yeah.
consume it somehow.
And a lot of people don't real at least the younger people need to realize is that there was no really consensus on a Western, translation until, like, 2000. Oh, that's only 20 years ago.
Crazy to
Crazy.
think, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, you gotta remember there was, like, in the early '90s, you could have seen some, what was it? It was a Quattro Vagina because there was no real translations, so, like, you saw, like, some weird translations of, Zeta action figures, and it says vagina, and you're just like, "Alright, cool."
I'll take it. And he's fighting against, Jamatov
He's
Hyman?
yeah.
Like, what?
Oh, so Hymen fights the vagina.
What
Hmm.
what did Tamino mean by this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
But
it
yeah,
it
and that's what a lot of people don't understand, sorry to cut you off there, is
No, no,
that,
please.
especially a lot of people like to correct me, which a lot I mess up names a lot, but people need to realize there isn't a consensus on a lot of this.
It's
And
true.
even I do not agree I don't have the greatest Japanese skills, but with my limited Japanese skills, I disagree with a lot of translations still. And like, it's very subtle, and it doesn't really help the story too much, but there are some nuances that are different, that you don't really get sometimes, unfortunately, with, the American distribution of things or the Western distribution of things.
Yeah. And I mean, that could lead us down the rabbit hole of like localization and those
Mhm.
types of creative choices that sometimes I think they're warranted, sometimes not. And
Yeah.
especially as I've been kind of going through Gundam media for like the Dissecting Gundam series I did, there are certain things that I think come off better when they are localized. Rekka's characterization in Zeta Gundam is
Mhm.
kind of far better in the dub than it was in the subtitled version. But then there are certain things like the gendered language between Sayla and Kai that occurs in the original series that a Western audience wouldn't necessarily pick up on due to the
Mhm.
kind of like you said, it's very nuanced little language
Yeah.
differences that maybe we wouldn't understand, but I think that that's where it's almost like imperative on the translation team to help the audience understand instead of changing it to something completely different.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, I agree, and there's this fine line when it comes to translation, that I don't even know where the line is, but I'm not translating isn't people like a lot of people like transliteration, which is literally taking what you see and translating it. Nippon, Japanese, the word for Japan is transliterally land of the rising sun, right? But
Yeah,
we call it Japan. We call it Nippon. Um, so people love transliteration more so than translation. But I think to get a Western audience to understand things better, you have to translate things. So how do you translate and adapt to a Western culture without losing some of the literal things that you would get in a transliteration of something, you know?
exactly.
And it always I always go back to that, the meme of the Death Note of what is it? The Keikakudori, right? And it would have it would say,
Oh,
the translation would say, "All according to Keikaku." And then you would see a translation note, and it would just be,
according.
"Keikaku means plan." And you're just all like, "Just say plan." And it's like, "What are you doing here? You're going too far." So there's it's obvious, like, people still romanticize what Eastern things, so they like the Japanification of things. They like words to be more Japanese just because it sounds cool.
Yeah,
But translate things. That's what translating is. It's to adapt to another world. And I'm a person who mainly watches the Japanese version of things. That's coming from me. I still think that that's the reason why a lot of people watch subs still for that reason, and they're losing a lot when they're doing that, at least culturally.
yeah, I would say so, and I mean, and I know that there's the kind of argument between like, oh, well, subs versus dubs, how it's and meant to be viewed, and in a lot of ways, I almost feel like while dubbed is not how it's meant to be viewed, you are meant to understand the audible
Mhm.
language more so than what's written, and you're supposed to
True.
consume both at the same time.
Yeah.
When you're reading, you're naturally going to miss things that are on screen, so it's like, you're kind of like and it
Yeah,
goes back to your point, it's a very fine line, and it really has to be done case by case basis.
it really does, yeah.
It's not an easy job, and so I get really, irked with people who say like, "Oh, we'll just machine translate everything and we'll, call it
Ah,
good," and it's like, that's definitely not the answer.
No.
yeah, I
Oh,
learned
boy.
that from watching Gundam with how fast and awesome the action is. I used to be like a subtitle snob with films and stuff, and then I think through Gundam, I was like, I kinda like a dub because I really wanna look at what's happening, especially
Mhm.
how Steven, you've taught me a lot of Tomino's writing is to show little things happening that is not really in the dialogue. So you will then, yeah, miss that. But at the same time, I also enjoy subtitles because if I ever want to get a deeper look at a show or a movie, I will watch it again with the subtitles to kind of get a better understanding of what's going on. So, and I wonder how much through, especially in the West, the early years of anime coming over and being translated, that's caused maybe this disconnect where when people are consuming this for the first time, they're like, okay, what's happening and what's being said is so goofy. I don't know when it's really just i- a overall hard time to really translate localized, make it make sense, whether it's just culturally or the nuance as we spoke.
Mhm.
And then I wonder if my years of playing so many Japanese video games for the gaming and not for the story, and then getting into Gundam, I sort of then understood that layer that you have when you're watching or consuming something that's translated. So it's almost like a little bit of a give that I am putting out there as I'm taking in the content. And maybe that's what it takes. It maybe takes getting
I
over
think
that.
so.
Yeah.
I think so, honestly.
Mhm. That's right.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what is the solution to this. I don't have an answer. I think the answer is to learn the language and the culture,
Yeah.
which is impossible for
But it's
every
fun.
language, at
I
least.
think a lot of benefits can come out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And even someone like me who has been studying Japanese a little bit, I'm never, ever, ever I could spend a lifetime and I'll never understand certain things just because I didn't live it. And that's just a fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's
yeah,
very
there's
good
like
point.
a good, I forgot who said it, but it's like you can learn 80% of a language with ease, but learning that 80 to 100% will take far beyond your lifetime.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. 'Cause, and most people and Kyle, tell me if this is true for you, where because like I only speak English, German, and Spanish, and I
Mhm.
still have to translate the meaning of the words in my head back to
Mhm.
English before I can respond. You
Same.
know,
Yeah.
same. So it's like,
Yeah.
so you can never really inherently um, understand at that level unless
Yeah.
you are that native speaker, where it's like you just learned that that object is represented by that word.
Exactly, yeah. There's always gonna be that latency issue of me just kind of working. Oh, okay, translate this to that,
Yeah,
it's never gonna be just natural. There's always gonna be some type of lag to
that
me
Yeah.
barrier.
thinking and yeah,
Yep.
it may be like milliseconds, but still, there is gonna be
Yeah.
something there.
And
Yeah.
you know what? That could contribute to why I never appreciated late UC content. It's just there wasn't a
Mhm.
good way for me to consume it in in my native tongue. Um, but yes, I mean that's something that's, I don't know, probably just an excuse, because nowadays I could probably watch Victory Gundam and enjoy it.
True,
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, that's funny because I like Victor Goodham, and I remember watching it, I was like, "Ah, subtitles." But, um, I guess at least I got the name I feel like I got the names down quicker with
Right.
the subtitles.
Well, and it's funny, Kyle, you
Mhm.
mentioned that, like, people will tease you about, like, mistranslating things, and honestly, I've come to, I don't even remember who I heard say this, but it really stuck with me, where I appreciate when I hear people mistranslate things because it means that they read it as opposed to hearing it. And
Yes.
so it's like,
Oh,
and so I
yeah.
naturally attribute, like, oh, well, then that means that they probably are more educated than I am, right? One of my really good friends, Tom, we both love the same soccer team, and
Mhm.
everyone always gives him a hard time because he mistranslates players' names, or mispronounces players' names. Sorry, and it's because he's reading them in a newspaper and like online, and
Yeah.
everyone teases him about reading newspapers, and it's like, what, are you jealous because you
Reading.
can't read? Like,
Yeah, that's a good point. When I'm doing research, and probably you get the same thing, guys, it's like we're reading these Gundam names so much.
Yeah.
And then when I go to do a video, sometimes I'm like, "Wait, how is that pronounced really?" And then I'll look it up, or sometimes I'll just give up, and then I'll just give multiples when I get to it. Yeah, but
It's ridiculous, and then they become tongue twisters, especially when you're writing them. And I'm trying to do voiceover lines, I'm just like, "Mashimer, mashes," and then you're just like, What is the name? I can't say it. I have to do it like 20 takes because these names are ridiculous."
yeah.
And yeah.
Oh, yeah. They are. And
yeah,
then
and
that's the thing, it's funny because it's like, you're almost worried about pissing off a Gundam fan. "Huh, that's a true fan, that's not how you pronounce it," but it's like, it doesn't really matter.
At
But
one
is
point, yeah.
but is it really gonna piss anyone off? Because really people are cool at the end of the
For the
day.
most part, yeah,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
yeah.
because most of those things have become memes at this point
yeah.
anyway, like, the
Mhm.
Tetons and all of that, and,
Yeah. Love it.
so, like, it's just part of enjoying it, and so much of it is born out of the fact that when a lot of these names were created, they were taking words from other languages and then, like, using them in Japanese, and so then when they get brought back over, it's like, "Well, wait a second,"
Yeah. There's, like, 3 levels of translation because it's a Japanese guy. It's Tomino going out and, like, looking at, like, French words and going, "That sounds cool. I'm gonna use that poorly." And then someone else translates that poorly translated Japanese version of French into English, and you're like, this is all just bastardized. What happened here? What's going on?" Yeah. And you see that in, like, I'm trying to think, I just watched the dub of G Gundam recently,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
what's his name? The Minaret Gundam pilot is named Sait, and the dub just says Sate because of
Oh, yeah,
wrote it
that's
out,
interesting.
Yeah.
and just someone said it wrong, and no one corrected them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you were saying, before about, like, and this is probably pre-show, just like with Marvel not having editors anymore, like, it applies to voice acting too. Is like,
Exactly.
there's
Oh,
supposed to
yeah.
be a director in the booth that says, "Hey, I'm the source of truth here. Do that line again." And
Yes.
but in some cases, the director isn't. isn't bilingual either, so they don't necessarily know. They're just working with the
Mhm.
script that was given to them, and so there's so many like failures of responsibility, I think there.
Yeah. That
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
that kinda says what the budget is. Yeah. If you're watching it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a lot with the just my videos in general too. Most of my mistakes are just like, I'm doing this after work daily. I don't
Oh,
have time. I don't
yeah.
have time to edit sometimes. It's like most of these mistakes I know myself. I just didn't have the time
Yeah.
to make the edits, and I gotta push them out, man.
Hey,
Yeah,
did
Gotta
you
push
happen to
'em.
watch, the new Seed movie?
Not yet.
Oh,
No, I didn't get to go to the premiere because I was at WonderCon that day. I will be seeing it with everyone. When is it? May 7th,
yeah.
right?
yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
Now,
I
are
I
you
got
will be
going May
seeing
the
7th
it.
or May 8th? Are you gonna
Yeah.
see the subbed or the dubbed version?
I got the
Oh,
dubbed
right.
tickets.
Ah, I'll probably see subbed. I never watched the dubbed. Is it the ocean dub? It's not the ocean dub,
I don't
is it?
know.
I don't believe so.
I don't
I
know, but I'm interested too because, like, if you were to watch it, like, for a modern Gundam movie, how serious are they about the localization? I'm very curious
Right.
about that.
Mhm.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
think I'll go with subbed for my first watch, and then I'll probably go back and watch the dub eventually.
Yeah.
Um But yeah, I watched most of Seed I watched subtitled. I don't except for that really the first version of the Seed dub, which I guess they when they did the remasters, they completely went with a new one, which I get it. That was a terrible voice cast, in that
Which, the
first
new or
dub.
the old one?
The old one. So I haven't even
Oh,
checked out the new one yet, to
I've
be
only
honest. It
seen
could be good.
the
The
new
remastered
dub, and
one,
I
yeah,
I
okay.
thought it was
It was
fine.
good?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
I hear good things.
you know, I don't know, I think over time, I'm like I was talking about, I'm pretty chill with when it comes to dubbing something, I guess coming from video games, it's like, "Hey, as long as I get the point."
True.
Yeah.
But
I
I do
mean,
enjoy
it's
good acting, though, good voice acting, so, like, I think
Yeah.
Hathaway was the first time I noticed that, the voice actor for Hathaway,
Mhm.
mhm.
because, yeah, again, I didn't watch too much anime, but just how it doesn't seem like he was projecting every time he spoke. It almost seemed like he was talking to himself, and it almost gave it a real feeling, almost like when I was first seeing the acting happen in The Office, where sometimes how they would
Mm,
act in The Office is like, well, that's not really acting, and it's like, "Oh, that's the point." Yeah,
yeah.
There you
yeah,
go.
yeah, Hathaway was the first time I noticed that in an anime.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Interesting.
interesting, and there's so many, like, I would say tonal differences just between Hathaway, the anime, and Hathaway, the novels, like,
Mhm.
it obviously, there's gonna be story changes as well, but, like, yeah, even just the characterization of Hathaway is slightly different in the anime, I would say.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's a lot of characters in the at least the novelizations too.
Oh, yeah.
Tomino gets weird though and obsesses over he's really sexual in the novels. It gets weird.
It's like
Yeah,
PBA.
he's kind of, sexual in general. I've noticed that,
Yeah.
like, a lot of those, directors I think I saw a, Miyazaki quote going around, a few days ago where he was talking about, like, something that was grotesquely sexual, and it's like you don't imagine that coming from, like, Miyazaki, "Oh, cute Studio Ghibli
Oh, yeah.
guy,"
Yeah.
but, oh,
That's
man,
funny.
but yeah, anytime you get, like, Anno and, Tomino together, they just do nothing but, talk about private parts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it actually kinda reminded me of that one X-Men episode, just recently where they were at the no, there was 2 episodes where there was just a lot of back and forth with characters that were just suggestive of
Mhm.
not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just kinda weird sitting with my son, they're talking about that, it's like, do I
No,
explain it?
innuendo.
Oh yeah,
Like
especially
with
what was it?
Professor X?
The Professor X one where she's
Maybe
like,
I'd like that or
"I like
something
that,"
like
you
that,
know?
and I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, he was like, "Your
The
sister
collar?
thinks of me like a pet," and he's all like, "Oh, I kinda like that.
Yeah. It's like
Maybe."
but again, it's like it's not like that's really a bad thing, just
No.
sometimes we're caught off guard with how that stuff is decided to be portrayed.
I
Mhm.
think it's, for me, I think it's just a gap, right? I think there was something in children's animation for a long time that was missing, that we're starting to see come back slowly. We're not gonna get it to levels of, like one thing I like is, like, Ren and Stimpy, which was, like,
Oh, yeah.
so
Edgy.
such a great children's show, but such a great raunchy adult show at the same time, and you can watch it as a kid and see one thing, and watch it as an adult and see another thing. and I wanna see more of that from the '90s that we don't see too much of. You get a lot of themes and, like, I remember, like, Adventure Time was cool. It had a lot of adult
Yeah.
themes for being a children's show, but it didn't hit that edge. Maybe just that edge isn't there. '90s was all about edge and all that,
Right.
so maybe it's just
Well,
not
it's like
there anymore,
with The
but who knows?
Simpsons and Family Guy, I think that edge is when you're playing with
Mhm.
the subject matter instead of
True.
just outright displaying the subject matter. So I think that's what a lot of Western '90s, '80s, '90s animation was the adult part was because it was, like, on the edge of that,
True.
edgy, yeah. And
and
now
and
I
I
think
think that,
X-Men is
like,
example of it being more in your face,
Mm.
with that.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think that the difference is that in the '90s, we like, I would say that the Overton window, as far as, like, edginess goes, was so much tighter, and,
Mhm.
like, now,
Oh, yeah.
because we were kids that were raised on Ren and Stimpy and things like and Beavis and Butthead,
Yeah.
it's like the in order to be edgy, we have to go, like, so far outside
Is
of the
that it?
lines that, like, then it's no longer suitable for kids at all.
True. Kids are, like, watching porn at, like, 6, so it's like it's a whole different world, right?
Yeah,
How's your 10-year-old doing?
Yeah, luckily, none of that.
oh my gosh, yeah, it's
Oh,
crazy, and I don't know, it's one of those things where as I get older, and you guys are feeling this too, I'm sure, it's like, man, am I, like, becoming lame, or, like, was I as crazy as some of these kids are now? And, like, I don't know, I think that in some ways we were just as bad, but, I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think we're surprised. I think especially if you have kids, like, there's this protective nature that all of a sudden unlocks,
mm,
and you almost become hypocritical.
Oh, yeah.
I think and
Well,
you
we're all
can't help
hypocrites
it.
at the end of the day.
yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's funny 'cause I'll think about things my kids are doing or getting into, and then I think about when I was that age, and it's like, what was I really
Right.
thinking then? And then sometimes it's like, okay, is there that fine line? Yeah, there's that fine line between being protective and kinda letting them learn. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
interesting.
It's tough to say. But yeah, oh man, we have not even gotten to talk about some late UC stuff, and
So
really, I think
Gundam.
where this kind of conversation, where the idea of having you on, Kyle, came from last week's Gundam Explained show, which I kind of like how our shows have become this thing where it's like Wednesday's show dovetails into Thursday's show, which
Mhm.
then leads to the
Yeah.
topic that we talk about next Wednesday. Because we were talking about, like, the kind of gap of information when it comes to things that happen, like, basically from 0084 to,
Mhm.
like, Char's counterattack.
Yes.
And so, and some of it, it's like, I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of, like, Char's deleted affair or Haman's deleted affair as far as, like, the mangas go. But yeah, Kyle, can you help fill that gap for us? Because there's so much, like, I would say, lost media, and then there's, like, stuff that's completely misrepresentative of, like, I don't think we've even gotten an explanation from Bandai about, like, the
True.
Glemmy clones in,
Oh, yeah. UC
in
Engage.
No.
UC Engage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still not really sure about the Glimmy clones and, all of the Engage stuff, but there is, some things that we're missing, right? We get to, Double Z, right? Everyone dies, Neo Zeon falls, Glimmy's, rebellion falls, right? And then we have this gap from 89 to 93 where we just see Shar rise up, right? Out of nowhere. One thing I do know is that do you know what Gundam High Streamer is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so Gundam High Streamer has a it's essentially Char's counterattack, right? That
Before
they
the
Yeah.
movie.
before the movie,
Yeah.
right? And then the movie came out and they published this as High Streamer. Most of it's just Char's counterattack, but the first chapter kind of paints a picture of what's going on in Char's head during the time, and it's kind of what's happening is we get no answers about essentially uh, the beginning of Londo Bell and stuff like that. Um, we're just we just get thrown into it, right? But what we could assume, right? It's the Titans, it's Titans Light, right? They're working within the within EFF, right? And that is the biggest I think problem right there is that they Londo Bell is not a separate organization, and that is where the conflict kind of starts. And in this what is it, high streamer, we kind of get the insight into his head, because what we get is Londo Bell going to Sweetwater before he takes it over, before the people kind of embrace him as this new leader, right? Um, and what we see is Londo Bell from Char's perspective, and Londo Bell just seems like the Titans again to him,
Mm.
more or less. So we do get this insight into what he's thinking and what he's feeling at the time, right? So he is. Let me. I have a quote somewhere around here. Let me.
Although
So he
while you're
meets. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, because I was thinking you give time to look at that, but that kind of blew my mind. Char seeing Londo Bell as the Titans.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like, that can happen. I can see
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Um. So let's see. What happens is they kind of meet on the outsides of Sweetwater, and we get this. Where's it at? Right here. All right. So let me just read this quote. Don't change the subject, Amado. Gideon Zabi of the Principality of Zeon killed 5 billion people, but humanity still outnumbers the total population of the old calendar era. Humanity still hasn't reduced its numbers, and their minds remain rigid. I can't allow this. And so you'll destroy the Earth? Fighting the Titans alongside you was a good education. I realize even if you tried to become a politician and make internal reforms, it wouldn't do any good. And now you're just scurrying around with the Earth Federation forces like a mouse. So he is not seeing what Londo Bell and the others are seeing when they're coming to Sweetwater, because they go to Sweetwater in this book, High Streamer, to essentially take out a AGUM, which is like another anti-Earth organization. But now Londo Bell is taking care of them. So from his perspective, he sees an AUG like entity being taken over by Londo Bell in this moment. Um,
Which
and
is
it's
basically Colony 30, but
Yes,
the
exactly.
repeated.
So he's seeing this all over again in his mind. Um, and he also has like similar conversations with Nanai when he meets her in the book as well, and he kind of takes her on before they become lovers and whatnot. Um, and it seems like he is at a state of pure nihilism. He is
Mhm.
trying to kill himself. We don't get details, right, about exactly what's going on, but let's look back at Zeta, and we could, from a human perspective, see what Char is trying to get at, right? So we have a man who left Axis. He failed with a charge deleted affair. He failed at Haman. I said in my videos that he was grooming Haman. He is not grooming. He's doing the opposite. He is ignoring her. He should have been a mentor to her, and he didn't. And he did
Mm.
it because she loved him, and he felt weird about it. Um, so because of that, it led to Haman being Haman, this person that wanted power for herself, more or less. And he saw what he did with her. He saw that he fucked up. He messed up with her. He goes to the AU. He helps mentor Camille. He saw Camille, and if you played Zeta Gundam, the video game, there's actually a scene where you know how he's drifting out in the Hyakushiki at the end of Zeta? There's a
Yeah.
scene of him, actually, he sees Camille die, and that kind of sparks, kind of this
Wow.
fire in him where he just changed right there from, like, what you see in Zeta to what you see in Char's counterattack from that one moment.
Yeah, see,
So you
that's
s
I
so you see
used
him
to have
fail, right?
I used to have that opinion that, like, Char's heel turn in CCA was definitely, like, out of nowhere, but as I've learned more and digested more content, I think he was always destined to become the bad guy again. I think that we get hints very early, that he's not as reformed as he maybe claimed to be during Zeta. I think there's a certain line where, Commodore Blex says, "Oh, you want Camille to join the AU because you think he's a new type," and he says this weird, like, cryptic line back to him where he says, "If it makes you better to if it makes you feel better to believe that, then go on believing it," or something to that effect, and it's like,
Mhm.
oh, he doesn't even care about Camille in any, like, he sees Camille as another pet project for him as opposed
Wow.
to,
Yes.
like, yeah, a mentor-mentee
Yeah,
figure.
like the future. It's more
Yeah.
like, this is just for now, like to get where he needs.
For Ayuk. He's doing it
Yeah,
all for Ayuk, not really thinking about Camille or
Yeah.
his needs and
yeah.
wants
But yeah, go
and
on.
whatever.
Sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, you get Camille. This he sees it as a failure, right? He failed at being this mentor for Camille. Uh, he failed. I think I'm still trying to understand Rekoa, but he
Oh,
failed at providing for Rekoa. He kind of used her for his own needs, and then when she had her needs that she projected onto him, like he projected onto her, he ignored her. And the result of that was her literally defecting and becoming a fascist. That's the part I'm still confused about, but everything leading up to that, I understand Rekoa. Still a mystery to me, Rekoa. But yeah, we can see that as another failure on his belt, right? The ideas of Zeon Zoom Daikum no longer, I think, lived inside of him after that. He is now this person that just wants to end it all. And there's a line in Zeta after they take over Kilimanjaro, I think, where they all have a toast, and it's Amado and Char. And I think Amado says something along the lines of like, your idealism will, with that type of idealism, you'll be the next to be a martyr or something like that. And
I remember that.
essentially, his goal in Char's counterattack, his goal in between, we don't see it, but we see it in Zeta. He is trying to die. He will take any means possible to die. And the idea, I think, is that he is going to die for his cause and he's going to get a scorched earth and the world will start over, or Amado will kill him. And his ideas, because he really did believe in the ideals of Amado, but his ties to EFF just, I think that really pushed him
Kind of
away
poisons the
from
well.
him. Yeah, yeah, kind of just pushed him away. And this I think what happened is we're seeing a guy who is either I'm going to do what I'm going to do, or Amado's going to save us all. Either way, it's a win for me. And he's in this state, and
yeah.
when we see him in Char's counterattack, that he's still trying to do the ideas. It's trying to create a world, or a world where humanity leaves Earth, right, and we all live in space. He wants that still, but he's willing to literally destroy the Earth to make that happen at this point. And he realizes that what he is a man of ideals that is not rational, very emotional, a man who lost his parents very young to a cause that he thought he believed in. um I don't Yeah, he's over it. He is literally over it at this point, and he's ready to end it all or let Amado be our savior. And in the end, he got Amado. I think he got Amado killed because of that. Because Amado could have been the savior. He could have went on to be this leader that maybe brought the Earth together. Probably not, just because the whole concept of Gundam is we're always making the same mistakes. So probably not. But he
Hmm.
could have. He
Like
I
they
could
mean, he
have.
could
canceled
have
each
been
other
putting
out.
unrealistic
Yeah.
expectations on Amuro the same way that he was doing to himself, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
feel
that's
like
what
they canceled
idealism
each
does to
other.
people.
Sorry. No, I was,
No, no.
it's almost as simple as like they canceled each other out at the end.
Hmm.
Mm,
Almost.
One of
Almost.
them by themselves being able to, without interference, would lead the world in one direction or the other. With
Absolutely.
them not there, it's just as the same as them in conflict. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
mm.
Um, and I think that's what we need to focus on. I know we're trying to fill in the gaps here of what's going on. How did Londo Bell come about? What the
Yeah,
heck is this Londinium, the colony at Colony One? Where did this come about? Like all of that. Like, I think the one line that we do know is that Londo Bell was very understaffed. So we know by that we could assume Bright was probably like, Chomino, please just help me. I know you might die. I don't just come on. Oh man, I don't know what to do here. Help me out, man. um, so I think them being understaffed is definitely plays a product into how they are still kind of this entity that is trying to be this world police, but failing at the same time. But what I was trying to get at is mostly we need to look at the human aspects. Uh, just look at Char's character from literally the beginning of Gundam all the way up to Zeta, and you could kind of see where he's coming from. I know they don't outright say it, and I know media today wants us to outright say everything. We don't have to do that,
I
but
get
it's
that.
there. It's there. His intentions are there. Why he's doing what he's doing is absolutely there, and it's very nuanced. I go back and forth to loving Char and hating Char. So and that's a sign of a good character.
Yeah.
Um, I think.
Well said. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna have to come together again and talk more about Amuro and Londo Bell because that's another mystery that I've yet
Yes,
to unravel. But
definitely.
yeah, thank you for sharing that because again, I think that contributes to my overall better understanding of Char as a character.
That was
Mhm.
some insightful stuff that I'm gonna explore some more of. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that was
Thank
good.
you thank you for leaving us with some deep stuff to think
Hell
about.
yeah. That's what I'm all about.
But yeah, with that, I think we are gonna wrap up for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I sorry I didn't even get to any chat, but thank you guys for tuning in. Go check out Kyle's stuff in the links below because again, if you want deep, insightful, and cutting criticism of your favorite X-Men or Gundam media, he's the man to go to.
Yeah.
Until then, Gundam Explained show tomorrow.
Yep.
Um, and I think that's everything. Am I missing anything, Adam?
No, I think that's about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thank you guys so much. Kyle,
awesome.
thank you for joining.
Yeah,
And I hope you
definitely.
guys have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, see y'all.
Cheers.
Sure. See ya.